Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. As always, I like to remind everybody that our mission is to provide faith-based training and coaching for anybody who desires long-term employment. Our vision is to one day see a marketplace where work and faith connect. This morning, we are so excited to invite the CEO of Will Reed, Paige Robinson. She's joining us from Dallas. But there's a few things that I'm going to get to before we go into that interview. So I'm going to open us up in prayer, give a quick update, and then move on to the highlight of the morning. So if you would, bow your heads and I'll pray for us. Father God, Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for bringing us together this morning. Your divine timing and wisdom is what guides us through each day, and we know you provided the space this morning to hear exactly what we need to hear. Bless our time together so that we can leave here stronger and more prepared to further impact your kingdom. I ask all this in your holy and precious name. Amen. Okay, so just a few quick announcements. I want to let everybody know about our iWork Houston Expo, hiring expo presented by Houston's First Baptist Church downtown. This is happening on September 22nd. It's a completely virtual event designed to provide hope, build community, and connect job seekers with long-term employment. As the workforce rebounds from the pandemic, our focus is hiring Houston and getting everybody back on track. If you'd like to attend, go to workfaith.org and sign up today. Next, I'd like to introduce our podcast series. So we've been working on this for a long time, and we're going to launch our very own WorkFaith podcast on October 1st. So if you've ever wondered how you can unite your work and your faith in the marketplace, listen to the podcast. So again, starting on October 1st, we invite you to tune in, and we will help you navigate the question of how you can connect your work and your faith. The podcast is hosted by Anthony Flynn and will focus on thought leadership through conversations with distinguished professionals who have mastered the art of both work and faith in their daily lives. You can sign up for the podcast in the link that's being entered into the chat box. If you'd like to receive the first 3 podcasts before they actually launch. So with that, Anthony, I'm going to turn it over to you and Paige. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. In fact, great morning, everyone. It's absolutely my delight to be here this morning to share this platform with an awesome human being. My goodness, Paige Robinson. We met, probably 5-6 years ago. I can't remember now, Paige. It's been some years, but immediately we hit it off. Paige is one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met in my life. I love your story and what you represent, who you are as a wife, as a leader, as an executive. Man, you were magnetizing to me, and so it's a huge honor for me to be able to have this opportunity to share this platform with you. So it's a delight to have you here. Thanks for joining us, Paige.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to jump right in, and we're going to have our audience, of course, ask a few questions. And as you know, we will be sharing this with our entire database of over 5,000 people. So we're excited to get you and your message out to those who tune in with WorkFaith. So first of all, I'll have you just tell everyone a little bit about, your personal life, your personal story, and your journey to Christ.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, everybody. So I'm Paige Robinson, and I am the CEO of Will Reed. Will Reed is an executive search firm that helps early stage VC-backed startups build out their early executive teams. And I think some other things about me is, they alluded, I'm a wife and I'm a mom to 3 little kids. So I have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So I always say, I don't know exactly what's happened the last 4 years, but it's been great. I've been here for it. But yeah, being a mom is just so much fun. And getting to kind of grow candidly, like the venture of family and the venture of Will Reed at the same time has been a really cool, refining experience. To give a little bit of context for my story, I was sharing this a little bit before everybody joined the call, but I grew up in Dallas. I grew up with a loving family and a loving home that where my parents knew the Lord. And I think I got to see a really cool experience, probably in my later teenage years, where my parents shifted from, I wouldn't call it a dead church, but a church that really didn't emphasize like maybe community, to a church that where they actually, like my parents actually got plugged into their own community group that really like encouraged authenticity and sharing and being real. And I saw how that had a really powerful impact on us as we kind of were shepherded by a church that really emphasized that. I think, looking back on my journey to Christ, I accepted Christ at a really young age. But I would say that maturity in Christ probably really happened in college. So when I was in high school, this is kind of my ditch, if you will, is I really struggle with pleasing people. And in high school, by God's grace, I think that was steered away from a lot of really painful experiences I could have had that been mispointed. But I think particularly in college, I think the Lord really began to like seed the ground of where he was going to really work on that struggle in my life. And so what that looked like in college, where I went to Texas A&M, whoop, have to do it. I experienced what I would call Christian fellowship and friendship in a way I had never experienced in high school. So I really like looked up and was surrounded by just this amazing, amazing group of friends that loved me and poured into me. And I also had just the seed of entrepreneurship really watered in college. So actually I have two college friends that joined or that are online this morning. They can attest to this, but I wanted to build, create everything. I was that person that was always trying to make something, do something, start a conference. And I think that having that experience in college really prepared me to actually do something like that outside of college. And so when I graduated, I moved to Houston, married with my husband, and started, management consulting. But, about 2 years in, I was like, all right, I'm going to make something. I'm going to build something. I don't really know what it's going to be, but I want to build something. And I landed on building a app to basically help college students get connected to employers. And, I'm just going to, too long, don't read. It didn't work. So about 2 years in, we kind of looked up, and even though we had thousands of students using it, and we had, 5 campuses, and we'd sold, Anadarko and a number of other large companies, we just quickly kind of saw the math wasn't going to work. And, I was devastated. Like that element of like people pleasing, just candidly, like this experience of letting someone down, felt almost too heavy for me. And, looking back on it, you can like say like, okay, like that happens. Like you build businesses, it doesn't work. But it was a identity shifting moment for me. And, I think again, looking back on like God's grace for me in that season between my husband and those dear friends in college that kind of really showed me Christian fellowship. And then also where Anthony and I met, we went through Praxis. I went through the Praxis fellowship, and I went through that fellowship in that season. And for those of you, I know they're going to probably put it in the show notes, but Praxis is just this really awesome community and organization that really shepherds entrepreneurs. And so anyway, coming out of that, I really felt like the Lord in so many ways picked me back up, but made me a more refined leader. I started Will Reed, and, I'm now in my 6th year of building Will Reed. And, candidly, I wish I could say confidently that that ditch of, always trying to make everybody happy, and even to the point of, putting that before the Lord, is dead in my life. I would not say that. I would say the Lord has continued to use Will Reed as my crucible to teach me those things. But I'm happy to say that I'm battling well, and I'm really proud of the business that we've built, and see a huge opportunity with what we're doing. So I'll pause there. That's kind of the story. Bite.
That's awesome. And one thing I'll throw out at you is, and we'll talk about this here in just a few moments because we share this common bond of mentorship, but it's interesting. I see, your thoughts on people pleasing. Oddly enough, I see it as a superpower that you are continuing to work through learning how to mitigate, right? And put guardrails around. So the irony is what makes you great is that huge heart that you have, and that care, concern, and love for people, and your intentionality toward creating harmony for those who you interact with, right? If something is broken in their life, you want to repair it, you want to fix it. And that blends into how you run your business, how you lead your family. And so I see it as a superpower that just simply needs to be reined in at times. And we can talk about that. You know, you and I have a course, a common bond around mentorship that we'll share in just a moment. But before I go there, I'd love to hear you, and the audience would love to hear you share more about Will Reed, like what you do at Will Reed, why the name, what it represents.
Okay. Well, the name itself, I'll just cut to that because it's kind of funny. Candidly, we made it up. Most people name recruiting firms after themselves. And I just thought that for me personally, I just didn't want it to be like the Paige Robinson firm. I just didn't feel quite comfortable with that. And so, but I still liked the idea of it being a name, and I liked it, you know, kind of the symmetry on both sides and this kind of having this boutique-y feel. So we made it up, but the way that that's played out has been pretty funny. So at one point, my team was all female. I mean, for a decent chunk, I had an all-female team, and we actually would had somebody leave a review saying, "Wow, Will and your ladies, they're amazing." Like leaving a review about. I'm like, okay, there is no Will. I am willed. But yeah, it was. So that's the story. I get asked about that all the time. But okay, so here's what we actually are doing at Will Reed. So our clients. I think of them oftentimes like the Marines or the Olympic athletes, like truly. Mm-hmm. So these are founders that have built something that investors like Sequoia, Andreessen Horowitz, GGV, General Catalyst have decided to back. And they've run the gauntlet. They've done all these things to kind of get to that first and second level of funding. And they're basically it's like they're at the Olympic trials and they're trying to go to Tokyo or something like that, right? And so we enter after they've been basically they've gotten through the Olympic trials, they're on the team, and they're going to see whether or not they're going to make it. And so we come alongside these founders who are often, I would say, technical founders. So they don't know anything about business. They live in like code and building, technology. Many of them are immigrants, either first or second generation. And many of them are first-time founders. Like I would say probably only 10 to 15% of the founders we work with have done this before. Mm. And so we come alongside them and really not only provide the talent, but also provide really the expertise of how to think about their team. So we've actually done this so much that we have trademarked a program that we call talent infrastructure that we now actually white label to VCs to help founders hire out of network. So how do you basically move from hiring only your folks that you knew in your dorm room at Stanford to actually putting together an employer brand that can attract and compete for top talent as you move from like an infant startup to a mature organization? I think another wrinkle with this, I'll just add, is that the landscape has really changed in the venture world. So, it's the world I operate in, but if I didn't operate in it, I don't know that I would know this, but basically funding has been pulled forward for a lot of these founders. So, what was a Series C? So when companies go out and they raise a $50 million Series C, well, that's a Series B now. Yeah. And so what was a Series B? Series B is 10 million. Well, that's a Series A. Yeah. And so founders so much earlier in their journey have to basically put together a compelling executive team, but nobody's heard of them. And you still have a founder that's learning to really, who they are, the journeys that I think any founder goes through. What are they building? What's the mission? And so the opportunity I see that gets me up out of bed every morning is I think we have an outsized opportunity to impact culture. Whether we like it or not, these founders are creating our future culture. I always explain it this way, not a political comment. I'm not saying whether this should have happened, but Jack Dorsey proved more powerful than the president of the United States. Yeah. Like, let that sink in. Like, that is how technology is impacting our culture. And so I just see an incredible opportunity to be in the room early before these founders have made it or arrived, to be a blessing, a comfort, a guide, and, hopefully shepherd them towards making a successful business, but also hopefully being a part of, helping them think through how to make good culture.
That's beautiful. And of course we share that perspective, through Praxis. I mean, obviously we shared those perspectives before, which is what drew us to Praxis. But so you went there, and I was going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more about how faith plays a role in your delivery model, your operational framework, et cetera. You somewhat went there, but if you could, I want to be more explicit about how you're leveraging your faith to ensure that those who are shaping and creating culture, those who are shaping and creating the future, you have a role to play in helping to put together collaborative teams that influence the future of the world and how we do business and what culture looks like, et cetera. Do you mind elaborating a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I will confess that we are at base camp in this journey to do that. So, and I think that we're basically really getting like credibility in the platform to have a bigger, like more structured impact in that regard. But what base camp looks like is it means that, the way we do engagements, so we flat fee our engagements so that founders know upfront what they're spending, and we don't change our fees based on what someone gets paid, which often means like we leave fees that other people in the industry would win. We also just try to really have hard conversations. We don't shy away from telling, in grace, like hard things to founders about what has to happen to get their venture ready. And I think probably the most material impact is really around diversity, right? So everyone in the VC community is talking diversity, diversity, diversity. And to be honest, a lot of times the way it comes across is like, it's almost like you're going through the grocery store and shopping for fruit.
Right.
And it dehumanizes the other person on the other side. And so I think a lot of what we have really developed this is moving more towards structure, is talent infrastructure. It actually makes it plausible and doable for companies to hire people that they do not know. And that's diversity, right? Like if it's not your buddy at Stanford or, the sales folks that you knew at your last company, and you're trying to basically make a bigger tent, make more seats at the table, you have to feel comfortable and feel equipped to hire someone you do not know. And I think that's a big thing that people don't really talk about is it's like, yeah, just go out and hire somebody, but it can quickly feel like you're dehumanizing the other person versus like, okay, I'm actually, I'm going to have the same standard for everybody versus just the people I know. I'm gonna have the same standard for everybody. And I'm gonna have a really, really methodical way that I evaluate talent. And when, you look around and you have built a diverse team, no one was there because they weren't supposed to be there. They were there because they went through the process, and they were selected, and you confidently hired them for the job that you needed. And I think it's really empowering to the people that are at the table too. So anyway, I think that's just that's probably moving more towards the most structured approach. We're really trying to redeem a talk track that often gets talked about in our space.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And the bottom line is even though you're saying, hey, we're at base camp there, the bottom line is you are influencing the growth of culture. In fact, I appreciate the fact that you're at base camp because, in those early stages, you get to actually help them shape their culture on the forefront. And I think that's powerful versus having to undo and redo. You're actually on the forefront of helping them think proactively in the beginning. Here's what it should look like in terms of our operational model. Here's what it should look like in terms of how we impact culture. So I really appreciate that. And here's the irony, your approach with Will Reed and how you engage founders and VCs somewhat ties into just the passion you have for mentorship. And so one among many things that impressed me so much about you is when we talked, within us sitting down for 10 minutes, we had seen each other, but when we actually finally sat down and talked, within 10 minutes, you jump right in to your story and your passion around mentorship. And, I want to applaud you for your audacity, for your boldness. You are very courageous in all you do, Paige. And so I really appreciate that. And I know you sometimes will shy back from that, but I see it as courage, based upon some of the things that you and I have talked about. So maybe share a little bit more about where this passion for mentorship. So you all, just one example, and I won't get into too much detail, but Paige and I have talked about a young man that she's been mentoring for years. And this young man, his background really resembles that of mine. many of the challenges, where he's from, the community he's from, et cetera. So, Paige, with everything else she has going on, married with 3 kids, she still finds the time. In fact, she makes the time and makes the energy available to still pour back into others outside of her homogenous network, if you will. And so, Paige, talk about that and why that's so important to you.
Yeah, you're sweet to say all of that. I don't know that I deserve it, but I would say that. So I want to speak to that specifically, and then I can speak to mentorship more broadly. So this is actually one of the biggest impacts that Anthony's had on my life. So I do want to reframe one thing. My husband and I are mentoring this boy. It's not a one-to-one direct, but we are mentoring their family. And we met them through, we lived in Houston for 6 years. And so we got connected to them through Yellowstone. And I think one of the most surprising turn of events was that I became very close to his mom. Like we have like a very authentic, like we probably talk on the phone once every 2 weeks. I don't even talk to a lot of my like I talk to her more than like most people I talk to.
Right. That's what, yeah.
It's like every 2 weeks or so, like, when I was pregnant with my kids, I'm texting her, like, so she's really become like a part of like the fabric of my life. But Anthony has been invaluable in providing real tactical encouragement of where do we push, where are we pushing, where are we helping, where are we not helping. And so I am very, very grateful for that. But I think the irony of mentorship is you go into it thinking how you're going to help them, and it almost always goes the other way. And so, this was this started because I really, thought it would be cool to move to the 3rd Ward. Candidly, when we lived in Houston, I was like, oh, that'd be cool. And my husband's like, we're not doing that if we're not called there. Like the Lord is going to have to like verbally talk to both of us. And I don't know that he's going to be able to do that unless we're spending time in a meaningful way of actually interacting and contributing and being a meaningful, part of that community. And so we started spending time at Yellowstone, and candidly, the Lord never made that clear. Like we never moved to the 3rd Ward. We, just kept our involvement really like, through like Yellowstone and with this particular family, and we've continued to stay very close to them beyond that. But I always just think it's interesting that I think I look back on that was such a good encouragement for my husband, because I'm such a doer, which I think Anthony's checked out. I'm such a doer. I'm like, inspiration, go, and sometimes it's the it started off as like, we're going to mentor this family, and I think in all seriousness, like they genuinely have mentored us. And I think particularly the last year and a half of this broader national conversation that we're having, the most valuable things I have learned have been because of this relationship that's been developed for 6 years prior to that, where I got to just listen and ask a lot of questions, and like was so incredibly grateful for the humility and honesty of things that were shared with me through the safety and like the built trust of that relationship. So anyway, I know I'm kind of blending this a little bit.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I know I do want to say hats off to you, because frankly, rarely do people proactively reach out the way you and your husband have done. And specifically you to say, hey, I'm processing some things. Hey, I'm thinking about making this decision. So you mentioned humility from their side, and I'm saying humility from your side. That's where I use that word. I appreciate your audacity and your courage and in many ways your fearlessness, because many people jump out to mentor or to add value to the community at large, Paige, and they're not willing to pause and take into account how their actions, their movements, their decisions may be impacting those on the other side that they're serving. What I appreciate mostly about you is that you have always been deliberate. So on the one hand, while you say, hey, I'm a doer, it hits me, I feel it, and I'm ready to go. You've also been, in my opinion, calculated in your approach. And most people, honestly, just sincerely, I can't say that. And I'm around a lot of people who the mistakes are there, if you will, and that goes across the board, right? But something in you has always been intentionally calculated to say, I genuinely want to support and help people. And so as a result of that, I'm pulling in the resources from every angle I can to ensure that my intentionality for support is legitimate and real and beneficial to the person on the other side. Talk a little bit about that, right? Why is that important to you? And how do you encourage others to adopt that same mindset? Sorry, I hit you with a lot. I hit you with a lot.
No, I'm trying to, I think the why for me is I do just feel like, I mean, maybe this is just too, I don't know. I'm just going to say, here's the why. I think when I look at my life, I feel like the Lord thus far has spared me from trauma. It doesn't mean that I have not been through difficult things. Like, it does not mean that I have not faced challenges, but what we would characterize as trauma, I feel like the Lord has spared me from. And it does not come from a place of guilt or survivor's guilt or anything like that, but it comes from a place of like, why? Like, what, God has given us like the different talents that we have, right? And I think talents take a lot of different things, but I really see that, as an opportunity to be, to be generous with other people. Like, that's not something I did for myself, right? Like, you don't choose the parents or the neighborhood or the socioeconomic bracket that you're born into or the friends that you have, right? Like, there's so many of these things that like happen to you that create, especially childhood trauma. As a child, that's the big thing, is you don't choose that. That gets perpetrated against you. And then you have to make sense of that the rest of your life. And by God's grace, I have not experienced that. And so I do feel a sense of like, the Lord has been gracious to me to be gracious to others, to be the hands and feet, to be a safe harbor for somebody that cannot necessarily, at least in that moment, get out of that situation themselves. Because I think, again, when trauma is happening, trauma typically is happening to you. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but I do think that's at least part of it. And again, nobody gets to this life unscathed. I'm definitely not wishing hardship on myself. Nobody really gets to the end without experiencing some level of trauma. But to date, I do feel like God has enabled me to be a safe harbor for others, and to not like both recognize that and appreciate it, and then realize that candidly, like, that privilege enables me to be generous in ways where my cup is full that can spill over to others in this season. And I want to be cognizant of that and to be aware of that.
But I would say, and this is just my, I don't have empirical data to back this, right? But it's just my opinion, my perspective. There are lots of people who have a similar perspective, but yet who don't push past their own interests to actually go do what I've seen you do and live out and walk out for years. I mean, I'm talking the first time you and I sat down 6 years ago, we had a conversation, and you're still walking that thing out, right? I'm saying you won't pat yourself on the back, but I'm going to pat you on the back for that, because there are so many people who can't get past themselves. I mean, so mom with 3 kids, wife, mom with 3, like you're running a business that's scaling. You've got a lot going on, yet none of that is a barrier for you saying, I'm still going to step up to the plate and pour into culture and society, because of the fact that I feel my perspective is that God, even with me having challenges in my own life, there are other people, I feel like God spared me compared to others. And I'm not just stopping with the feeling that God spared me. I'm actually going to go do something about it. I think you can be an encouragement for so many other people, Paige.
You're sweet to say that. And I think, I mean, at the root of it, and I think maybe I'm almost putting like 33-year-old Paige's view of like looking back on it, right? Like, I don't know that I would have been able to say that at 24 or 25. Like, I don't know that I really had the broader like context of relationships and the realization of like those things. But, you know, I do believe like Christ changes us. I mean, like, he changes us, and he puts a song in our heart to do things that seem crazy, that seem like Natasha and I should not be friends. And she is like truly one of my closest friends in this world. We should not, like, objectively, we should not be friends. And I guarantee you, I win more in that friendship, 100%. And yet that's the picture of like what the Lord deeply wants for us. Like, I truly believe he is in the business of redeeming. He's in the business of redeeming. Like, he is the master storyteller. And I think about this all the time. Like, sometimes I just look up, I'm like, I'm in one of the Lord's stories. Like, he's doing something here. Like, I just want to be there. I want to show up because I just want to see what happens. Like, I want to see what the Lord is up to when it's messy and confusing. And, you know, like, I don't know. I feel like I see his fingerprints and things.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
if, and I know, again, I'm just hitting you with stuff. Are there one or two things that you can share for the audience out there? Somebody who's listening to this, who's watching this, who's saying, okay, I heard Paige say that she's winning in that relationship. What are one or two of the things you can share that someone who is willing to get out of their comfort zone, as you have done for years? I'm not talking about a day or two. I'm talking for years. You've been stepping out of your comfort zone and saying, I'm gonna jump out. Share, please, because this is a moment where we can help somebody. One or two benefits that you feel you've gotten that may inspire someone else, you know, to step out of their comfort zone.
Benefits, I definitely feel. Forgive me, Anthony. I want to be really thoughtful with my words.
No, absolutely. And again, I know I'm hitting you with.
No. I think this is a topic that right now feels like you can say a lot of the wrong things, and so I want to be thoughtful, but I also want to be authentic with like what that has looked like. So, I think the first thing is I do think it exposes your heart. It just does. Like, I think if you have a friendship with someone that really, really is like different from you, like we are in a totally different socioeconomic bracket. We are different, you know, racial identities. We had different childhood experiences. Like, we have totally different backgrounds. And if I am really honest, like, that friendship exposes things in me as a Christian at times where I feel like I may be being more of a helper, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I am so grateful for that friendship because I get to see that, confess that, realize that's not like the way that Christ sees us. Like, Christ sees us as like one, as the church, that we are sisters in Christ. And by being in friendship, I get to actually like practice truly the way God sees us. And I just think that that's been really cool. I think the other benefit is like, and this is the mom. So I spend probably the most time, Natasha. I spend the most time with the mom.
With the mom.
Like, so that's probably where my closest like friendship is. I think what I also love is that this is like the difference of opinion. She does not care about this, candidly, the silliness, the trivialness of things that like I can easily get caught up in, kind of being the Dallas mom of 3 and driving the Suburban around and all this stuff. Like, I feel like the questions she asked about my life just like cut me. Like, it just like cuts me. It exposes like what's actually real. And I feel like it strips away from my life, candidly, the crap. Like, it's just the crap. It doesn't actually, it's just not going to be anything. It's going to burn up and die when we are stand before God. And I feel like she is one of my most like authentic friends that like cuts me in ways like that to help me realize that and see that. And I think it's because, again, she has a different perspective and, a different, she's coming, she has a different type of, set of struggles than I do. And so what ends up uniting us, what's left, like the Venn diagram of our lives, what's left is like, what's just basic to being human and basic to knowing the Lord. And I think that's one of the coolest experiences ever to have with a sister in Christ.
Well, man, we could go for hours literally, because I could ask you so many more questions, but I think I want to encourage you and once again pat you on the back, because Paige, when I use the word courage, when I use the word audacity earlier, you just validated that. You push back a little early, say, oh, that's sweet, but no. Hear me out. Do you know how many people run from being cut? You use the word, man, it cuts, or it exposes your heart, so many people won't cross over that line of comfort because they don't want to be cut. They don't want to be exposed. They don't want to get, and that goes both ways, right, Paige? Meaning, because of where I sit in this conversation, I'm the product of family members who sit on the side of, hey, wanting a hand out instead of a hand up, or when they see someone of another race, they see it as an opportunity to take advantage of them or take them for. So I sit on both sides, if you will, of that socioeconomic conversation, that race conversation, et cetera. And it goes both ways. And so I appreciate your longevity, your steadfastness, your long suffering, even using, the fruit of the Spirit, the definition of long suffering. You have hung in there and fought for that relationship with Natasha, among others, right? Just your engagement at that level. So I want to keep pointing it out to you. And I want to keep saying that because I think you can be a gift to so many other people, again, regardless of where they sit in the conversation. What you're living out every day is exemplary of the types of gifts that I want others to experience in culture and society. That, man, if all of us would at times die to self and get out of our comfort zones and be willing to engage metaphorically across the aisle. I'm not just talking politics, right? You mentioned race, socioeconomic standing, career standing, whatever the case. There is huge opportunities to grow and to develop as a human being by being willing to get out of your comfort zone and experience life outside of homogeneity.
Anthony, can I say one more thing?
Oh,
Sorry
please.
About this, and then we can put a bow on it. I'm a verbal processor, and so I feel like a lot of times my clarity comes, 40 minutes into the conversation. Absolutely. But I think I want to just highlight, I think this actually clicked for me. What God has in store for us when we truly have friendships that are different than us. And again, there's a lot of different ways to have different friends, especially Christian friendships, is that I do feel like what you end up talking about ends up being stuff that's like real. Because again, I have a lot of Dallas friends, and this is not bad, but it's like, what are you going to redo your kids' rooms to look like? What schools are you going to? What's this? What's that? All great conversations. Natasha does not ask me any of that. Mm-hmm. And I am so grateful that she doesn't ask me any of that. She's asking me about how I'm doing. She's cutting into how am I doing with my kids? And it's because what's left, what do we actually have in common? It's those things. And that's what's really what's really cool. Mm. It's the real stuff that you have in common, not the fluff on either sides. And I think that's what God has in store for us and what he intended with the church, to be made one and to be made whole.
Man.
So anyway, sorry, that just
no, that's so good, because respectfully, I've been Natasha for so many other people. Right. I had a friend, and I'll say this, and then we're going to push to Q&A from the audience. I had a really close friend of mine who is a third generation heir to an empire. And I remember when I was starting the Gifted Foundation, which is what I launched in Praxis. And I remember getting a call from him and him saying, man, I would never in a million years have the courage to do what you're doing, like to start from scratch, because he was born a mega millionaire, and so he's like, man, I wouldn't even know where to begin. So for him, the gift of having a friend in me that just had in his mind, the bravery to just start something from scratch with having no idea how I was going to eat, as a metaphor, in his mind, it was a gift to him. And so
it's huge.
And so you've spoken of it from your perspective. I'm speaking of it here too, from my perspective, that I've seen the gift. I've been on the other side of being a gift. And I want to make sure I'm clear. That relationship has been an invaluable gift to me too, right? So, because I've learned so much that I never would have learned because I don't come from that world, right? So we've been, and literally, so yeah, I mean, I just want to point that out to those who are listening.
Yeah.
Paige, you hit it on the head about the opportunity for people to see the gift in it, that so he who is greatest among you is your servant. Don't just talk about that. Like, you're actually living that out, right? He who humbles himself will be exalted. Who exalts himself will be humble. You're humbling yourself before someone like Natasha, and God is raising you up in the process. And so I want people to hear and see and feel that. I want them to, you said it, I want them to experience the gift of life in that regard. So any final comments before we let the audience ask questions?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for saying that.
Oh man, that's awesome. Thank you. Awesome stuff. So your core value of treating people like people, what does that look like?
Treating people like people. Very tactically in my business, every person that applies to any of our jobs, they hear back. Like, we don't like trapdoor rejections. We don't shy away from having hard conversations with candidates when they don't move forward, which is a really, really common practice in our industry, because there was a human being that applied for a job. They had intent to get work. And so we try really hard to bring honor to that process. I think also just the nature of how we interview people for jobs. I think there's room for us to honestly kind of go back and even get better at this, but I think there is perspective of knowing them as a person beyond just how you can shove them into whatever job you're calling about, and kind of keeping up and being viewed, I think, as a really invaluable resource. I'll give you an example. Anyone I ever take a phone screen with, I will always give them LinkedIn feedback. I will always take the last 10 minutes, even if they're not a fit for the job, we'll say, hey, from a recruiter perspective, if this is valuable to you, let me tell you how a recruiter review your LinkedIn. And here's what keywords you need to do. Here's all the stuff, so that you get 15 calls from people like me. And I've gotten notes back from people over the years of that helped me get a job, or someone found me. So that's just again, little stuff, nothing big, just little things.
That's awesome. The irony is we're going to be doing some LinkedIn training with our team, just because of the work that we do on a daily basis. So the value of something like that is powerful. So thank you for sharing that. So even our team can afford to hear the power of LinkedIn and how we use it and leverage it. And that's awesome. There's actually one more question that I wanted to ask before I jump right back into Q&A but how have you managed the pressure of being in a world where, someone of your stature, your background and story, right? You could have just chosen to, and I say just, I want to be cautious in that you'll see where I'm going with this. You could have chosen to be a stay-home mom and not have Will Reed, yet you made the conscious decision to you're a wife, you're a mother, you're mentoring and pouring into the community. And I know you're involved in your church community, and yet you're still running Will Reed as a venture. Can you talk a little bit about that decision and why? Why do you get up every day and continue that juggling all those balls?
Y'all, I can truthfully say my husband is like the most encouraging person. Y'all, I have at least tried to quit this 3 times. Like, he's the most encouraging person to me, to stick with it. And I think like a big part of this is like, I think he like really sees in me that God has given everyone, everyone has gifts. Like, this is not like a comment on, I don't know. He just like, he sees in me the gift of like creation and leadership. And he's like, Paige, this is, God is going to ask us about our talents and how we use this. And obviously we don't want this to come at the expense of our kids.
Yeah.
But he was like, you have an obligation to use the talents that God's given you. And a lot of the talents that you have right now are best utilized are utilized in the home, but also need to be utilized outside of the home. And I obviously like really love what I do on most days. I hate it at least 2% of the time, but on most days I love what I do. And it's really encouraging to feel like I've got this like incredible support system at home. And I think as we move, like as I think just where we're headed is that more and more women are going to either choose to work or have to work. And I don't necessarily feel like I have a lot of like mentors or examples of people that are doing that or have done that. And I don't pretend to have it all figured out. But I do see like a chance to like be that for somebody, to like be that person for somebody, and like not to like gloss it over and make it look like it's something's not. My team definitely knows where the bodies are buried. Like for sure, like me abruptly ending call. I'm like, I'm gonna end this call because I'm supposed to be at the pickup line, like now, bye. The messy middle of all that. But yeah, I'm very grateful.
No, once again, I think you can be an encouragement, to so many others. That's, my wife was home for a decade, and then, she's now in the investment banking world. And like, one, I encourage it. And two, she's gifted. I mean, she really is. And it's showing, in a very short period of time, she's escalated up the ladder in that investment banking world. And so she's an anomaly, one of few people who look like her, gender, race, et cetera, in the organization. So I too, but the team knows I'm a huge fan of the parable of the talents. Is one of my favorite passages. I preach it all the time. So thank you for sharing that. So, in selecting the generic name for your company, was there a strategy behind choosing a man's name instead of a woman's name?
In hindsight, maybe I wish I had chosen a woman's name. I honestly didn't think about it at the time. I didn't think about it. We just were kind of like, okay, we'll read resumes, we'll read jobs. Like we liked that it had like motion to it. I don't know. I know now it is kind of weird because I'm a female founder and I have a male name for my company, but at the time I didn't really think that through.
So we have another Praxis compadre here that says, at Praxis, we often discuss understanding is the essence of care. Understanding is the essence of care. What are some strategies you can lean on to help create understanding that we can practice to help us care for people well?
Ooh, that is good and deep. Maybe I'll say this more through like something I'm working on. I don't know that I've necessarily arrived at this. I think something that really has been probably one of my, maybe this is a more female trait. I don't know. Something that's been surprising to me is like wearing the hat of boss has been a really unusual like hat for me because I'm used to everybody being my friend. Mm-hmm. And I think as I've like adjusted to the fact that like I am their friend, but I also am their boss. And there's certain things that have to be true for that to make sense. I think one of the biggest gifts that remains that a boss can give to an employee is understanding. It's like seeking to understand. And I think that candidly, like when I don't do that, it's because I'm moving too quickly. And so I think for me, when I think about that particular, and honestly, this is true for my kids too. I mean, I oftentimes I'm disciplining without understanding. It's always better to like discipline your kids, at least understanding where they're coming from. It's hard to understand if you're in a hurry. You just can't. you just are you're speeding through. And I think that's true. It goes even back to the mentor relationship when you're mentoring someone that, that maybe is different than you. If you're trying to check a box and do it quickly, it's just not going to work. It's messy. It's long. It takes a long time to really build trust and understanding. So
man,
anyway, I think that's where my struggle is.
You're reading my, you're challenging me here, because everybody knows I'm a very that's always been my greatest struggle, is that the way God built me, the way God wired me for speed, for intensity, etc. The greatest challenge I always have on the other side of that is issues around empathy and issues around slowing down long enough to make sure that I get so and you mentioned at work, at home, that's that's years of therapy, years of coaching. Yeah.
It's a very common ditch for like the entrepreneur, I think. Because you're built to create, you're built to speed, you're moving people around to make an outcome happen. And it takes time to balance that with also like, oh, there's a person there that has feelings about this that I didn't even understand, or I didn't even try to understand.
Yeah, the good news is I have a lot of people around me here who are continuing to help me on a daily basis navigate that. But and I know you do too, right? So you definitely hit a nerve, and that's real, like you said, for those entrepreneurial spirits like you and like me, for sure. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and I hope that those who are out here who are wired that way are hearing that as well. So. One more. What are some structural barriers you experience when attempting to help college students and grads with finding employment that impacted the success of your company?
So our business has shifted a lot. So we actually really don't work directly with college grads anymore, because now we're doing more like executive search. That said, I do see from the time, like we had an internship for 2 or 3 years that we really tried to help, kind of, I would say, diverse college students break into tech. And I think one of the biggest like challenges there that I saw, that I still, I don't know that I have a way yet to like meaningfully impact it, but I do know some really good folks that are weighing into that, is like, there's just there's like a professional learnings that like have to happen even before you show up at your job day one. So everybody shows up at their job day one without like knowing how to do that job typically. But there's this whole like experience of like the office, like, what did dad do when he went to work, and who are dad's buddies, and what do they talk about, and how do you respond to emails or send calendar invites, or how do you like create a spreadsheet or organize your time? I mean, there's just a whole host of things. And so anyway, that was like one barrier that I saw that we as our organization, just because of where God's pointed us, we're not meaningfully able to address. But I'm very encouraged because I see 2 or 3 really amazing organizations that are tackling that, in addition to just like, oh yeah, we place students into jobs, because it's not sufficient. It's a start, but not sufficient.
There was one more question about why you chose early stage founders. I think you addressed that earlier, when you were talking about what, just culture creators, et cetera. So that being stated, I'm going to jump to the question after that, which says, how do you balance your time between work, mentorship, marriage, motherhood, worship, et cetera? And we'll essentially wrap here with this last question.
So this question is from, I saw this one. This is from Lee Partridge. This is actually my husband's old boss that had a huge impact on his life and taught him what Christian leadership should look like. Mm-hmm. So kind of a fun connection.
And Lee's amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lee, I do not have that totally figured out. What I will say is that what Travis and I are realizing is that our life has to look a lot more structured than I would have necessarily thought. So like, unless we structure time for us to have a date night, it's not going to like magically like present itself. If we don't structure time to like spend with our kids, it's not going to present itself. And so I think we've created some really kind of unique rhythms over the last like 3 or 4 months, pretty new, that as we've gotten to 3, and now school's starting and activities are starting and all this stuff, where like, kind of the three structures that we've added to our life is, Thursday night is always date night. We don't necessarily go out to eat or do anything, but it's reserved. Friday morning, we have what we call a FOPS meeting. It's family ops. So Travis and I both don't go to work till 9:30. So from 8 to 9:30, it's like the logistics of the madhouse. Like, because we don't have like this is the beauty of having a stay-at-home mom. Travis and I like split that role. So there's really 3 jobs to run our family, and we both have a half job that we try to like figure out together and who's doing what. And then on Friday, we basically really protect Sabbath. So we like do like pizza and movie with our kids. And I would say it kind of rolls through like Saturday morning. When I'm at my best, my phone is off, and Travis's phone is off. And Friday night is just like a chance to like rebuild and all that stuff. And we actually were talking about it. I feel like we did not protect that this Friday. And I am feeling that coming into this week. Like, we cannot make it without like truly some time that is, separate. I think probably the last thing, Lee, and this is like the thing I don't 100% know what this is going to look like, but outside of this commitment that we have, to this family that we've kind of mentioned a little bit on this call, most of my future mentorship needs to probably exist at this season of my life in one of the 3 ways I'm investing my time. So it's like through my church, through my work, or to my kids. And obviously my kids are the fixed one, like that can't move. And so these other 2, like, I don't know that this is like heartbreaking for me, because I am like the idea person. Like I'm the person that's like, what if I started, Bible study for Hillcrest High School? It's right down the street. And I'm just like, girl, when? This is not,
no.
this is no. Luckily I have him like being like, no, like hard pass. So I think I have people pouring into my life. It's like, you have to be faithful to where God's already placed you, and pray for God to like reveal ways that he wants us to be the hands and feet right now, at least in this season with 3 little kids, where he already has me. So that's kind of the next ground for me.
Well, the last thing I'll say there is, once again, one of those things I've admired about you is that, we've talked about, you're wired for ideas. You're wired for, you by virtue of being an entrepreneur, you have the spirit to what's the word I'm looking for? To innovate, to be creative, to ideate, et cetera. Yet you have disciplined yourself to allow yourself to operate within the confines of structure. And you have been intentional about even putting that structure around yourself, because you know yourself. Hence why you lean on your husband, or lean on friends, or lean on me, and et cetera. Right. And so, man, I'm truly grateful for that, Paige, because a lot of people don't have the maturity. And so I'll say, we've been working as a team. I've been challenging our team to say, there is a way for you to give your, conventional metaphor, your 40 hours a week, right? And be intense with that 40 hours, and yet still have a life outside of work and have room for family. And I'm hearing you articulate examples of how you're doing that. Right. And so again, I appreciate that. We appreciate having you. And the last thing I'll ask you to do is share with how we can get in touch with you. For the audience out there that may want to leverage your services, how do people stay in touch with you? And we'll wrap there.
Yeah. Feel free to email me. It's really easy. It's paige@willread.com. Feel free to email me. Feel free to drop us a line on the website. Thank y'all so much for having me. Also, just fun to see Tommy Thompson. I haven't seen you in forever. So glad that you tuned in. Thank you to some sweet, dear friends. Good to see you, Lee, and so many other people's names I at least recognize. Blake, one of the first people we ever placed as Will Read. Anyway, awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Well, thank you for your time, and we appreciate you greatly. And of course, I know you and I will be talking soon, and God bless you, my friend, and tell everybody hello, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Have an amazing day. Thanks. Bye-bye.